Kris Jenner beat her 9-year-old daughter while threatening to kill her. She abandoned her children for days to pursue affairs with younger men. She forced her kids to lie about her infidelities and used them as accomplices in her betrayals. She made her 14-year-old daughter drive her siblings to school so she could get her hair done. And according to her daughter's ex-boyfriend, Kris orchestrated the release of Kim's sex tape, watching multiple versions to choose the most profitable one. But somehow, even after all that, she's celebrated as the ultimate momager, the loving mother who built a billion-dollar empire around her family. And in this video, we're taking a look back at the villain behind the fame and breaking down how Kris Jenner turned childhood trauma into profit, motherhood into manipulation, and her own children into products. The blueprint of a predator. Now, the story everyone thinks they know about Kris Jenner is wrong. Dead wrong. Most people believe she's this fierce mama bear who turned her kids into superstars through pure hustle and determination. But the reality they've carefully hidden paints a very different picture. And to really understand how dark that reality is, we have to go back to the very beginning. You see, Kris Jenner was born in 1955 in San Diego, and by the age of 7, her world had already been shattered. Her alcoholic father abandoned the family, leaving young Kris with a single mother, MJ, who would teach her daughter lessons that would echo through generations. But MJ's version of survival wasn't about strength or resilience. It was about something much, much darker. According to childhood friends and family accounts, MJ essentially groomed her teenage daughter to target wealthy older men. At 17, and I need you to really process this, 17-year-old Kris was pushed into a relationship with a 29-year-old professional golfer named Cesar Sandu. But here's where it gets truly disturbing. Kris was instructed to lie about her age to secure these relationships. Basically, this was a systematic preparation for a life of calculated manipulation, and it worked. Kris learned early that survival meant attaching herself to power, that love was conditional, and that everyone, including family, was expendable if it served her goals. But Cesar Sandu was just practice, because while engaged to him, Kris had already set her sights on a bigger prize, Robert Kardashian. And when Cesar came home from a trip to find them together in his own house, well, let's just say this was the first time Kris Jenner's messy public betrayals would make headlines. However, the pattern was set, and it would only get worse with each relationship that followed. The making of a monster. Kris would marry Robert Kardashian and have 4 children: Kim, Kourtney, Khloe, and Rob. To the outside world, they looked like the perfect family. But thanks to Robert Kardashian's private diary entries, released by his widow years later, we know the truth about what was happening behind closed doors. According to Robert's diary, Kris was not just neglectful, she was abusive. One entry described her kicking and beating Kim, saying she was going to kill her, while 9-year-old Kim was hysterical. Another entry reveals that Kris would leave the children alone for days while she pursued her affairs, with no emergency contact information. But the psychological damage went deeper. Kris forced her young children to lie for her extramarital affairs, turning them into accomplices in her betrayal. The affair that would ultimately destroy the marriage was with Todd Waterman, a 23-year-old soccer player 10 years younger than Kris at the time. But this wasn't just cheating. Robert's diary reveals that Kris was using his money to shower Todd with expensive gifts, essentially making her children's father pay for her affair. When Robert finally caught them, and yes, it was in their marital bed, the confrontation was explosive. But what happened next would change everything for Kris Jenner. Robert filed for divorce and cut off all financial support. For the first time in a long time, Kris found herself completely powerless. But there was something else happening during this time that would serve as her twisted inspiration. Her best friend, Nicole Brown Simpson, was being systematically abused by her husband, O.J. Simpson. And when Nicole was murdered in 1994, while Robert defended O.J. in the trial of the century, Kris had a realization that would shape everything that came after. She would never be powerless again, but the method she chose ensured that the power would make her one of the most destructive forces in modern entertainment. Building the machine. After her divorce from Robert, most people expected Kris to disappear. She had no money, no career, and a reputation as a serial cheater. But they underestimated her completely. Instead of finding another wealthy man to depend on, Kris did something different. She found a vulnerable target that she could control, Bruce Jenner. Now, Bruce was an Olympic champion, but by the time Kris met him, his career had stagnated. He was struggling financially and privately battled gender identity issues that made him emotionally vulnerable. But to Kris, he was perfect. And just so you know, this wouldn't be just marriage. This was a hostile takeover. Kris immediately positioned herself as Bruce's manager and systematically took control of every aspect of his career and finances. She revived his public image, secured endorsement deals, and turned him into a profitable brand, which you've got to give her credit for. However, she would also successfully ensure that it was all under her control. In fact, according to Bruce, or should we say Caitlyn Jenner, she has no idea where most of that money went because Kris controlled everything. And I mean everything. This was Kris Jenner's evolution. She had learned that depending on powerful men was dangerous, but controlling vulnerable ones, that was where the real money was. And then she had an idea that would change everything. During this time, reality television was exploding. Shows like The Simple Life with Paris Hilton were creating overnight sensations and massive profits. Kris studied these shows obsessively, but she had one problem. She needed a hook, something scandalous enough to get everyone's attention. That's when Kim's sex tape with Ray J conveniently surfaced in 2007. Now, officially, this was presented as a leak private video that embarrassed the family, but Ray J has a very different story. In multiple interviews and social media posts, he's claimed that Kris Jenner orchestrated the entire thing. According to him, there was actually 3 tapes and Kris watched all of them to determine which one made Kim look best. I'll give you a moment to let that sink in, but just in case it hasn't, let me break it down. We're talking about a mother allegedly reviewing multiple intimate videos of her daughter to choose which one to release for maximum publicity impact. Ray J even claims that he has text messages and contracts proving Kris's involvement in the distribution deal with Vivid Entertainment. And Kris's own response to these allegations as her mother, she was horrified by the tape. But as her manager, she saw opportunity, one that Kim could leverage. Even if you believe her version, she was just making the best of a bad situation. That statement alone tells you everything about Kris Jenner's priorities. And that opportunity became Keeping Up with the Kardashians, a 20-season, 300-episode empire that would transform her children into global brands worth billions. But the real cost of this success wouldn't be measured in dollars. It would be measured in the psychological destruction of her own children. The factory floor. Here's what most people don't understand about narcissistic family systems. And make no mistake, that's exactly what Kris Jenner created. It's a systematic assignment of roles designated to keep everyone competing for the narcissistic's approval while serving their agenda. And Kris assigned those roles with surgical precision. Kim became the golden child, beautiful, compliant, and most importantly, profitable. But being the golden child in a narcissistic system isn't a blessing. Kim bore the brunt of Kris's physical abuse as a child, conditioning her to believe that love had to be earned through performance and perfection. Khloe was assigned the role of the scapegoat. From birth, Kris described her as different from the rest of the family. When Khloe was just 14, Kris gave her a fake government license and made her drive her young sisters to school because it was more convenient for Kris's schedule. This illegal act could have resulted in Khloe facing 6 months in jail, but Kris didn't care about the risk to her daughter. Kourtney fluctuated between scapegoat and problem child, especially after she started therapy and began setting boundaries. Rob became the lost child, invisible because he couldn't be monetized in the same way as his sisters. And yeah, there's Kendall and Kylie, Kris's daughters with Bruce Jenner. They were born directly into the machine, raised from birth to be products rather than people. Kendall became the model. Kylie became the beauty mogul, sexualized from childhood and pursued into relationships with older men like Tyga when she was still a teenager. But here's what makes this even more twisted. Kris literally ranks her children by their financial success. I'm not being metaphorical here. On her Instagram bio, she lists her children's businesses in order of profitability. When Kylie hit billionaire status, she moved to the top. When Kim's Skims reached a $3 billion valuation, Kim reclaimed her spot. The message to her children is clear. Your value to me is directly tied to how much money you generate. And the psychological manipulation doesn't stop there. Kris uses classic narcissistic tactics like triangulation, pitting the children against each other by comparing their work ethic and success. The results speak for themselves. Kim's 72-day marriage to Kris Humphries, Khloe's repeated returns to serial cheater Tristan Thompson, Kourtney's toxic relationship with Scott Disick, Rob's complete withdrawal from public life, Kendall's severe anxiety and panic attacks, she's too powerless to escape because the modeling contracts must be fulfilled. Kylie's pattern of dating much older men, including Tyga, following the same blueprint her mother established decades earlier. These aren't character flaws. They're trauma responses from children who were taught that love is conditional and that their worth is determined by their productivity. But the most disturbing part isn't what Kris did to build her empire. It's who she's connected to now and what it might mean for the next generation. The web of darkness. For a decade, Kris has been in a relationship with a man called Corey Gamble. Most people have never heard of him, and there's a reason for that. Corey Gamble barely exists outside of his connection to Kris Jenner. According to public records, he was supposedly Justin Bieber's tour manager in 2014, working for Scooter Braun's company. But here's where it gets weird. There's virtually no documentation of his employment history before meeting Kris. Even family members have expressed concerns about his mysterious background. But Corey's connections run deeper and darker than just a pop star management. He's linked to Lou Taylor, the business manager who orchestrated Britney Spears' conservatorship and allegedly stole over $18 million from her. Lou Taylor also happens to manage the Kardashians' finances through her company TriStar Entertainment. And then there's the Diddy connection. Corey was present in the crime scene photos when Kim Porter, Diddy's ex-wife, died under suspicious circumstances. He's been photographed walking with Beyonce and Jay-Z like he's part of their security detail. And most disturbing of all, there are allegations that he was connected to Diddy's operation during the same period when young artists like Justin Bieber were being quote-unquote mentored by the music mogul. Kanye West, during his public breakdown, made several claims that seemed delusional at the time, but are looking more credible now. He said Kris and Kim tried to have him committed to conservatorship like Britney Spears. He expressed fears about his daughter North being exploited the same way Kim was, and specifically he called Corey CIA and said he didn't want him around his children. Now consider this. Kris Jenner helped fund a church called California Community Church where members were encouraged to donate $1,000 per month. The pastor went from working at Starbucks to owning an $850,000 house, while the congregation continued meeting in a hotel conference room. This church was co-founded with help from Lou Taylor, the same woman who used churches as part of Britney's financial exploitation scheme. The same Lou Taylor who was recently named in a lawsuit alleging she sent payments to Diddy's sex workers on behalf of his operation. The web of connections between Kris Jenner, Lou Taylor, Diddy, and various celebrity churches creates a pattern that's impossible to ignore. These aren't coincidences. They're coordinates on a map of Hollywood's darkest operations. And at the center of it all sits Kris Jenner, the woman who learned early that children are commodities, that trauma is profitable, and that loyalty is just another transaction to be negotiated. In the end, you can say Kris didn't build a family empire. She built a trauma factory with $1 billion output. Every hug is calculated. Every family moment is content. Every relationship is a potential storyline. And the most terrifying part? She's not done. As her grandchildren grow up in front of cameras, as the next generation learns that their value is measured in likes and brand deals, the cycle continues. The machine that Kris built doesn't just consume her children. It's designed to consume their children too. This isn't a success story about a mother who helped her kids achieve their dreams. This is a cautionary tale about what happens when childhood trauma metastasizes into an empire built on exploitation. Kris Jenner learned early that love isn't safe, that power comes through manipulation, and that everyone, including your own children, is expendable if it serves your agenda. She didn't break the cycle of abuse, she inherited it. She perfected it, monetized it, and turned it into the blueprint for modern celebrity culture. The devil works hard, but Kris Jenner works harder. And like I said earlier, the price of that work ethic isn't measured in dollars, it's measured in the souls of her children. Now, I want to hear what you think. Can you even consider Kris Jenner a mother with the way that she treats her children? Let me know what you think in the comment section below. And if you like this video, make sure to like and subscribe, and we will catch you on the next one.